No one ever thinks the end will come like this. The scratch of keys at midnight, the harsh flicker of fluorescent lights overhead, the way cold cement presses through thin cotton blankets and creeps into your bones. For Captain Grace Whitman, these were the details that marked her final hours. She tried to focus on her breathing, counting the slow rise and fall of her chest in the darkness. One more breath, one more heartbeat. Sometimes that was all she had left. Grace pressed her forehead to the cool cinder block wall, closing her eyes against the swirl of images in her mind. She was 39, a former Army medic, and now a condemned woman. The world outside had turned away after the Red Trail scandal, after the trial where every witness seemed to lie. Grace had always believed that truth could not be silenced. Tonight, that belief was fading with every tick of the ancient clock in the corridor. Her only solace, her only hope, was a memory. Something beautiful and battered and living. Solace. The Mustang with the gray and white coat, eyes dark as midnight. He'd come to her in Afghanistan, half wild and wounded, pulled from the wreckage of a bombed-out stable. It was she who had calmed him, fed him with trembling hands, wrapped his legs, whispered stories into the night to keep him from bucking and breaking. And when she came home, broken herself, it was Solace who had saved her in return. He became her therapy, her tether to something pure. But now, as steel bars separated her from the world, even that comfort felt unreachable. A distant shout echoed down the prison block, bouncing off stone and steel. Grace stiffened. Every sound in this place carried its own threat. There were stories about the night shift, guards with vendettas, inmates desperate for one last bargain. Grace had learned to sleep light, to trust no one. The guards tonight moved with extra purpose, boots echoing sharply as they made their rounds. She knew why. There were rumors that executions were sometimes moved up, that final hours could become final moments without warning. The warden had warned her, "Say your prayers, Captain. You've got one night left." But it was not prayers that kept Grace awake. It was fear and something deeper, unfinished business. She couldn't let it end this way. Not with the real criminals still free. Not with Solace's fate uncertain. Her hands shook as she unwrapped the bundle of letters she kept hidden beneath her mattress. Letters from Emma Stokes, her oldest friend, a stubborn, quick-witted journalist who never stopped believing in her innocence. Each letter was a lifeline. Tonight, there was a new one. Slipped under her door, the envelope was crumpled, the handwriting hurried. "Don't give up. Solace is missing, but the truth will follow." Grace's breath caught. She read the line again, tracing the words with her thumb. Emma would never lie, but what did it mean? How could Solace be missing? He'd been safe at the Veterans Ranch, cared for by volunteers. The idea of him alone, hurt, frightened, sent a wave of dread through her. Had someone targeted him too? Had they hurt him to silence her? The thought squeezed her chest, harder than fear of death itself. A clang jolted her. The cell block door slammed open, light pouring in like a flood. 3 guards approached, faces set in stone. "Whitman," the lead called, his voice sharp. "Up, now! You're moving to isolation!" No explanation, no kindness. They never gave her either. Grace pushed herself up, bones aching. She gathered her few possessions. A photo of her parents, a worn army patch, Emma's letters. She tried to stand tall, but her legs trembled. The guards cuffed her wrists and led her out. As she walked, inmates pressed against their bars, some hurling curses, others murmuring prayers. A few watched in silence, eyes shining with pity or something like respect. She passed the warden's office, the lights burning late. Through the window, she glimpsed Colonel Henry Keene, her nemesis, the man whose lies had stolen her life. He stood with two suited men, arguing in low, urgent voices. Keene's eyes flicked to her. For a heartbeat, she saw triumph and maybe fear. The game was still on. The isolation cell was smaller, colder, with a single high window that let in no moonlight. As the door shut, Grace's knees buckled. She sank onto the cot, feeling the weight of the world pressing in. Her thoughts spiraled. What if this was it? What if Emma's message was a last act of hope, nothing more? The truth might die with her, and Solace. She couldn't bear the image. She pressed her fists to her eyes, stifling a cry. Somewhere beyond these walls, her horse might be suffering. Somewhere, Emma was risking everything for one more chance to set things right. Grace clung to that thread, even as despair gnawed at her. In the suffocating silence, she whispered, "Hold on, Solace. Just hold on." Time dragged. The guards checked on her twice, their faces unreadable. One left a bottle of water and a Bible. Neither brought comfort. In the stillness, Grace remembered the desert wind of Afghanistan, the feeling of Solace's heartbeat under her palm, the scent of hay and sweat and freedom. She closed her eyes and let herself drift, just for a moment, back to a world where hope was possible. Then, a sound, soft, almost imagined. Was it a distant hoofbeat, the echo of memory, or the first sign that her story wasn't over? Grace listened, breath held, daring to believe that even here, in the final hours, the truth might find a way in. While Captain Grace Whitman counted the seconds in her isolation cell, the city outside was not sleeping. In a cramped apartment barely a mile from the federal prison, Emma Stokes paced the length of her living room, her mind a thunderstorm of worry and determination. Emma's phone buzzed constantly. Messages from fellow journalists, veteran advocates, and a few anonymous sources who seemed to know more than they should. But one message kept echoing louder than the rest. Solace is missing. The words had hit her like a blow to the chest. If the Mustang was in danger, so was Grace. And the clock was ticking. Emma glanced at the couch, where Tommy Harlan nursed a split lip and clutched a battered laptop. Tommy was younger than Grace by a decade, a veteran whose haunted eyes rarely met anyone's for long. Yet he had been the one to spot the first clue. A shadowy man lurking near the ranch where Solace was kept, a car with government plates, a flash drive left in a horse blanket. Tommy was driven by gratitude. Grace had once dragged him off the battlefield when everyone else had given up. He'd been loyal ever since. "We have to move," Emma said, pulling on her jacket. "If Keene's men get to Solace first, we lose everything. I'm not letting Grace die for his crimes." She shot Tommy a look, daring him to object. Tommy nodded, jaw set. "I'm with you, but they know our faces now. We can't go to the police. Keene owns half the department." Emma considered that, her fingers tightening around her phone. The message she'd sent to Grace was a risk, but she couldn't let her friend die alone, believing Solace had simply vanished. There had to be a reason for the Mustang's disappearance. Every instinct screamed that it was more than a threat. It was a message, a warning, and maybe, if they could decipher it, a clue that would blow the whole conspiracy open. They left the apartment by the back stairs, moving through puddles and broken light. Tommy led the way to a borrowed pickup truck, the kind that could blend in on any ranch road or city block. The night air was sharp, stinging with the promise of rain. As Emma slid into the passenger seat, her heart hammered. Somewhere out there, Grace waited. Somewhere, Solace might be in pain or worse. Tommy drove fast, headlights slicing through the fog. The city's edge blurred into dark warehouses and empty lots. Emma checked her phone. A ping from one of her sources, a grainy photo of Solace, limping, bleeding, led by a man in a uniform she recognized from court. Her hands shook. "Warehouse District," she said. "Turn here, now." Tommy swung the truck onto a side street. Tires screeched, drawing glances from a pair of security guards who melted into the shadows when Tommy glared at them. They parked 2 blocks away, moving the rest on foot. Emma could feel her heart in her throat with every step. "Stay low," she whispered. The warehouse loomed ahead. Metal doors rusted shut except for a gap wide enough for a man or a horse. Emma peered through, adrenaline flooding her veins. Inside, the musty air reeked of old hay and motor oil. Stacks of crates created mazes of shadow. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard a faint, shuddering whinny. "Solace," Tommy whispered, hope flickering. They moved quickly, weaving between obstacles. At the far end of the building, Solace stood tethered to a beam, one hind leg wrapped in bloody gauze, nostrils flaring with pain and fear. Emma's heart broke at the sight. He was smaller than she remembered, trembling, sides heaving. On his back, beneath the tattered saddle, something was stitched into the fabric. A bulge, a hidden pouch. "Hang on, buddy," Tommy murmured, gently stroking the horse's neck. Solace leaned into his touch, eyes rolling. Emma fumbled with her pocket knife, slitting the pouch open. Her fingers found a small, sweat-stained USB drive. Evidence, she hoped, of everything Keene had done. Emma's breath caught as she realized the risk Grace must have taken to hide this, and the trust she placed in her friends. A noise made them freeze, a scuff of boots on concrete. Voices low and urgent. Emma cursed under her breath. "We're not alone." Tommy's eyes widened. "Keene's men? Has to be. Get Solace loose, now!" Emma scanned the exits. There was no time for stealth. They would have to run. Tommy untied Solace, whispering soothing words as Emma stuffed the USB drive into her jacket. The horse stumbled, but when Tommy tugged on the lead, Solace surged forward, wounded, but still proud. Footsteps thundered behind them. "Go!" Emma shouted. They bolted out the side door, Tommy leading Solace down a narrow alley. Emma followed, every muscle burning. Behind them, shouts and the bark of a radio. "Don't let them get away!" They darted between parked cars, zigzagging across trash-strewn lots. Solace, sensing their urgency, rallied despite his injury, trotting at Tommy's side. Emma's lungs burned as she glanced back. Flashlights danced through the warehouse windows. She jammed her phone to her ear, speed dialing her hacker friend. "It's happening. We've got the drive. Meet us at the safe house and bring the laptop." Tommy loaded Solace into the truck's horse trailer, hands shaking. "How much time do we have?" Emma slammed the truck door. "Not enough. They'll come after us, and they'll be armed. We get this to the feds, or Grace dies." As Tommy gunned the engine, Solace whinnied, a raw sound of pain and hope. Emma pressed a hand to the horse's muzzle. "Hold on, big guy. We're going to save her, I promise." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Emma sent a message to Grace's attorney, attaching the photo of Solace and the drive's location. For a moment, she saw her friend's face. The courage, the strength, the terrible loneliness of innocence betrayed. It fueled her. With every mile, dawn crept closer. And somewhere in the city's heart, Grace Whitman waited for a miracle. In the suffocating quiet of isolation, Grace Whitman closed her eyes and surrendered to memory. The walls faded. The icy cot beneath her faded. Even the terrible weight of not knowing what would become of Solace drifted away, just for a little while. She found herself back in Afghanistan, in the dust and heat, on the very day her life changed forever. It had been late autumn, the kind where the desert sun gave no warmth and everything seemed carved in gold and shadow. Grace, then a captain with just enough years to be seasoned but not jaded, was tending a wounded boy in a bombed-out village. That's when the first whinny rang out, raw, frantic, desperate. At first, she thought it was just her own nerves, strung too tight by days without sleep. But then she heard it again, sharper, and something in her snapped. She left the boy in the care of her medic partner and sprinted toward the sound. Smoke curled from the shell of what used to be a stable. Soldiers shouted, "Ma'am, it's too dangerous!" But she ignored them, ducking beneath the collapsed beams. There in the darkness, a half-wild Mustang thrashed against his restraints, blood oozing from his flank, white and gray coat matted with mud and ash. His eyes rolled, wild with terror. Grace moved slowly, her hands raised, voice low and steady. "It's okay," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to the horse or herself. Inch by inch, she approached. The Mustang, later named Solace, bared his teeth, hooves striking sparks against the concrete. She knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees, and showed him a strip of gauze. Her intention was to help, not harm. Miraculously, the animal stilled, sides heaving. It was the first time since childhood that Grace felt pure fear and pure purpose mingled together. She saved him that day, dragging him clear of the burning rubble while bullets snapped in the distance. The bond between them grew in secret, shared apples from her ration pack, whispered stories as she brushed out his mane under the desert stars. Her soldiers, tough men and women all, joked that Captain Whitman's crazy horse was good luck, but she knew better. Solace wasn't just luck. He was a living symbol of survival, and eventually, of hope. The memories rolled forward, each one as vivid as the last. The time she was ambushed on patrol and Solace, sensing danger, blocked her from an IED with his own body. The cold nights she lay against his side to stave off nightmares, her hand resting over his heart, the two of them breathing as one. Grace taught her unit how to care for the horse, and in return, the soldiers opened up, talking about losses, fears, dreams they'd left behind. Solace listened to every confession, never judging. Some said his dark eyes understood more than any human ever could. Then came the day of her return home, wounds hidden beneath her uniform. She fought the VA for months to bring Solace stateside, arguing that he was more than a pet. He was her lifeline. Finally, after letters and interviews and red tape that seemed endless, she succeeded. Solace was flown in, stepping off the cargo plane and nudging Grace's shoulder as if to say, "We made it." But peace didn't last. Grace's sense of duty, her refusal to ignore corruption or cruelty, put her on a collision course with Colonel Keene. She remembered the first time she confronted him, her voice steady as she accused him of falsifying reports, putting soldiers in danger. The fallout was swift. She became a target. Her unit, once a family, split under the pressure. The trial was a blur of lies, evidence twisted by men with more power than conscience. Back in her cell, Grace shuddered. She'd never imagined it would come to this. Her freedom gone, Solace taken, her name smeared. Yet even now, As the minutes bled together, she clung to what she'd learned on those endless desert nights. Survival was not just endurance, it was hope. A sudden burst of laughter from the cell block brought her back. It was the cruel, nervous kind, echoing off stone. But Grace focused on the echo of hoofbeats in her memory, the way Solace had shielded her from harm, the sound of her unit's voices as they rallied behind her. If she had nothing else, she still had her story. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there was fighting for her. Miles away, Emma and Tommy were hiding in a rundown motel, hearts racing as they took stock of their situation. Tommy, still shaking from the warehouse escape, watched Emma pace the floor, her phone glued to her ear. "We can't go home," Emma said, voice tight. "Keen's got eyes everywhere. But if we can decrypt the USB, we might have enough to force the DOJ's hand." Tommy stared at the injured Solace, who stood quietly in the makeshift stall they'd rigged behind the building. He remembered his darkest hour, years before, when Grace had found him sitting on the edge of his own despair. She'd talked him down, given him purpose, stitched up his wounds, literal and invisible. "We owe her everything," he murmured. Emma stopped pacing. "We won't let her down, not now." As they huddled together, the sense of community deepened. It wasn't just about Grace anymore. It was about all the soldiers failed by the system, all the innocents left to fend for themselves. Tommy reached out, his hand steadying Emma's, and in that small gesture was a vow. Whatever happened next, they would not give up. They would keep fighting for Grace, for Solace, for the truth. And somewhere, locked in her cell, Grace felt the faintest flicker of strength. She pressed Emma's latest letter to her heart, whispering to the darkness, "Not yet. My story's not over." The dawn that broke over the city was brittle and uncertain, cold rain streaking the glass of a battered motel window. Emma sat on the edge of a sagging bed, nerves pulled taut, her phone resting between trembling hands. In the next room, Tommy tended to Solace, whispering encouragement as he checked the horse's bandaged leg. Every minute brought a new kind of pressure, hope and dread warring for space in Emma's chest. A ping jolted her. An encrypted chat window opened. "We're in. Evidence coming soon. Hold tight." The message came from Maya Lin, a whistleblower Emma had met covering a story on military fraud years ago. Maya, once a cyber analyst, now ran an underground network for people trying to right impossible wrongs. Emma had called in every favor she could remember, sending the details of Grace's case, the USB drive, and Solace's injury. The response had been immediate. "We believe you. We'll mobilize." Emma moved to the window, drawing the curtain just enough to see the deserted parking lot. She could sense the city waking up, commuters and dog walkers oblivious to the invisible war being waged just beyond their sight. The news had already begun to shift. Free Captain Whitman was trending, fueled by veterans, journalists, and animal welfare advocates. In a matter of hours, Grace's story had gone viral. Each new retweet felt like a lifeline tossed into deep water. Tommy entered quietly, a fresh bruise blossoming on his jaw, evidence of last night's chase. Solace ate a little. He keeps nudging the door like he wants to go home. Emma managed a thin smile. "He will, Tommy. We're not alone anymore. People are rallying." Tommy knelt by the window, watching the world pass by. "Did I ever tell you what Grace did for me? When I got back from my third tour, I was a mess. Couldn't sleep, couldn't talk to anyone. My old squad didn't recognize me. Grace showed up one night with a six-pack and a deck of cards. She listened. She didn't try to fix me, just let me be broken for a while. Sometimes she'd bring Solace. That horse would just stand next to me, breathing slow. Made it feel like everything wasn't falling apart. Emma listened in silence, her heart twisting. She knew there were hundreds of stories like Tommy's, veterans who'd found a second chance because Grace had refused to let them give up. It was why so many strangers were risking their own safety now. Loyalty, Emma thought, isn't about blood. It's about showing up when the world turns its back. Her phone rang, a video call from Maya. Emma swiped to answer, Tommy hovering beside her. The screen flickered, resolving into Maya's sharp, tired face. I've got something. The USB, it's not just emails. There's a video file. Red trail ops, the payoffs, the cover-ups. Keen's voice on half the calls. Enough to sink a general, maybe more. Emma's breath caught. How fast can you get it to the networks? We're preparing a live drop. Hacked feeds, public forums, the works. But you have to get closer to the prison, Emma. It needs to be undeniable. Grace's innocence broadcast while the world is watching. Tommy nodded, resolute. We'll make it happen. What about the police? Maya hesitated. You'll have allies. Veteran groups are organizing. Some are planning a protest at the prison gates. And there's another thing. Animal rights activists. Solace has his own following now. If you can get him to the protest, it'll draw the press. Keen can't silence that many people. The plan crystallized. Emma felt hope bloom, fierce and painful. We'll move at dawn. After the call, Tommy suited up. Old boots, battered jeans, a camo jacket that had seen better days. He helped Emma load Solace into the trailer, whispering to the horse. You're the bravest soul here, buddy. Don't let anyone tell you different. As they drove, Emma called out to the online community. Veteran advocates, former soldiers, journalists who'd once covered her stories, even animal rescue groups. Messages flew in. We'll be there. We're spreading the word. No one gets left behind. By the time they reached the city limits, a stream of cars trailed behind. Flags in the wind, homemade signs flashing in headlights. At a police checkpoint, Emma's nerves jangled. She glanced at Tommy. You ready? He grinned, eyes sparking. Born ready. A young officer approached, suspicion sharp in her gaze. What's in the trailer? Emma leaned out. A hero and a witness, and a whole lot of people who want the truth. The officer hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice barely audible. I served with Captain Whitman. She saved my sister's life. Go, and watch your back. Keen's got friends everywhere. They rolled past the checkpoint. Emma's heart hammered. In the back, Solace stamped once, as if sensing the tension. Tommy's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. He's leading us, Em, like he did in Afghanistan. As the sun rose, the prison loomed ahead, surrounded by reporters, protesters, and patrol cars. The crowd surged, veterans in uniform, families with children on their shoulders, activists waving banners for Grace and Solace. A cheer rippled as Emma and Tommy pulled up. Solace, restless, whinnied, catching the attention of every camera. Emma's phone buzzed. Maya's voice. Go live now. Emma stepped out, holding her phone high. We have proof, she shouted. Grace Whitman is innocent. The world will see it today. Solace reared, mane flashing in the morning sun, a living banner of hope and resilience. Tommy grinned, tears streaking dust on his cheeks. Let's finish this, Captain, he whispered. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. Online, on the news, on every street corner where someone believed justice still mattered. The unlikely family, Emma, Tommy, Solace, and the swelling crowd stood together, daring the world to look away. Inside her cell, Grace heard the noise growing louder, the voices, the chants. She pressed her palm to the cold window, hope flooding through the cracks. "Hold on, Solace. Hold on, everyone. I'm right here. Don't give up." And for the first time in weeks, she believed she just might make it home. The clock on the warden's wall ticked mercilessly. In the windowless isolation cell, Grace tried to keep her mind still, but her body betrayed her. A tremor ran through her hands every time she thought of Solace, her horse, her hope, missing somewhere out there. Maybe suffering, maybe already gone. The sounds from outside were swelling now, seeping through stone and steel, chants, shouts, the distant wail of sirens. Grace pressed her fists into her thighs and shut her eyes, desperate to keep panic at bay. In the prison's administrative wing, Colonel Henry Keene stormed through the corridors, barking into his phone. "I want those protesters gone. Now! Find Stokes and that kid. Bring me the horse if you have to. No mistakes. Not tonight." The veins in his neck bulged as his men nodded, scattering to do his bidding. He'd spent years building his empire on secrets and silence. Now, with the world suddenly watching, everything felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. Outside, Emma and Tommy stood shoulder to shoulder by the horse trailer. Emma's phone was glued to her ear, voice hoarse from a dozen interviews and urgent calls. "This is Emma Stokes. Yes, we have evidence. A USB drive with recordings, bank transfers, orders signed by Keene himself. I need you to go live right now. Yes, I'll send the feed. But listen to me. If they stop us here, it all disappears." Tommy's nerves were steel, but his eyes betrayed the fear that stalked him. Solace stamped anxiously in the trailer, nostrils flaring. Tommy stroked the horse's nose, whispering, "Easy, boy. You're the key. Just a little further." The protest outside the prison was growing by the minute. Police lined up, radios crackling, trying to hold back a tide of veterans, journalists, animal advocates, and ordinary citizens who believed in Grace's innocence. Someone handed Emma a megaphone. Her hands shook, but she raised it anyway. "My name is Emma Stokes. I'm here for Captain Grace Whitman, and for every veteran who's been betrayed by the system. If we don't make noise now, we might never get another chance." A roar of support surged through the crowd. Banners waved, flags snapped in the wind. In the chaos, a pair of black SUVs pulled up across the street. Keene's men, faces hidden by mirrored sunglasses, watching for the right moment to strike. Emma noticed, shuddered, and nudged Tommy. "They're here. Get ready to run." Inside the prison, the warden's phone rang off the hook. Calls from senators, generals, and angry relatives. Each time he answered, he felt the weight of the country's eyes pressing down. He wanted to buy more time, but the execution order was clear, the window for intervention closing. 10 minutes, he muttered, pacing the hall. 10 minutes, and all hell breaks loose. In the parking lot, Emma's phone buzzed, a message from Maya. "They're planning to intercept you. Get Solace ready to move. Use the back route. City Park is clear for now." Emma grabbed Tommy's arm, pulling him toward the trailer. "We need to go, now. Keene's people are coming." They jumped into the truck, adrenaline burning away exhaustion. Tommy revved the engine, steering the rig onto a narrow service road behind the prison, tires spitting gravel. In the trailer, Solace shifted, sensing the urgency, his eyes wide but focused. Emma glanced in the mirror, spotting black SUVs peeling out in pursuit. "Left! Through the park!" Emma shouted, fumbling with her phone to broadcast live video. The truck barreled across an empty soccer field, mud flying. Behind them, Keen's men gave chase, sirens blaring. Emma dropped the phone onto the dash, the live feed shaking with every pothole and swerve. "This is real," she gasped. "If you're watching, share this now. The truth has to get out." Tommy swung the truck onto a winding bike path, ducking branches as they cut through the trees. The SUVs were close behind, their tires screeching. A police cruiser blocked the exit from the park, its lights flashing. Emma's heart nearly stopped, until the officer stepped out and waved them on, mouthing, "Go! Go!" Solace, sensing the break, let out a piercing whinny that echoed through the trees. Emma's live stream exploded with comments. "That's the Mustang! They're running for their lives! Free Grace!" Just as they reached the edge of the park, one of Keen's SUVs cut in front of them, forcing Tommy to slam the brakes. Emma lunged for the trailer door, yanking it open as Solace danced nervously. "We have to move! Get him out!" Gunshots rang out, shouts, the crack of a side mirror shattering. Emma ducked, dragging Solace from the trailer as Tommy took cover behind the truck. Protesters from the rally, seeing the chaos, rushed toward the commotion, phones raised, recording everything. The crowd formed a wall between Emma, Tommy, and Keen's men, refusing to back down. Solace stood tall, muscles quivering but unyielding, placing himself between his friends and the attackers. A protester, a Vietnam vet in a battered cap, stepped forward, raising a weathered hand. "You want the horse? You go through me." Others joined him, voices united. "No more cover-ups! Free Captain Whitman!" For a moment, time froze. Keen's men hesitated, confronted by the sheer force of the crowd. Tommy clutched Solace's lead, Emma holding the USB drive high. "This is your chance, Grace," she whispered. "Hold on." In the cell, the sounds outside grew louder. Chants, sirens, the hope that had nearly died in Grace flickered to life. "Emma," she whispered. "Tommy. Solace." In that instant, the countdown clock hit 0. The warden reached for the phone, ready to give the final order, but outside, the world had already decided. They would not let Captain Grace Whitman die in darkness. The world outside the prison had erupted. News vans lined the street. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward, beams of light slicing through the dawn mist. Reporters jostled for position, shouting questions and holding up microphones as the crowd thickened, a living tide of banners and voices. Free Captain Whitman trended at #1 on every platform, but for Grace, locked in isolation, the noise was a distant, muffled roar. She paced the cell, her steps tight and measured, fingers running over Emma's last letter, her last thread to a life she feared she'd never see again. In the chaos outside, Emma and Tommy huddled near Solace, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Solace stood firm, his wounds bandaged, eyes bright and alert despite the chaos. Emma's phone was hot in her palm, every second ticking by with unbearable pressure. She watched as Maya Lin's face popped onto the screen, framed by computer monitors and scrolling code. "Are you ready?" Maya asked, her voice sharp, barely audible over the din of the protest. Emma nodded, heart in her throat. "The world's watching. Let's do it." Across the city, Maya's team of whistleblowers, coders, journalists, veterans, moved in perfect sync. They hijacked the prison's live security feed, splicing in the files from the USB, video after video of secret meetings, payouts, threats, and, finally, audio of Colonel Keen's unmistakable voice. His words rang out, cold and clear, across every TV, laptop, and phone. "We'll take care of Whitman. She won't be a problem after tonight. Within minutes, the internet exploded. The hashtag Red Trail Conspiracy shot up the charts, and the network anchors scrambled to narrate the breaking news. People all over the country paused at breakfast tables and bus stops, transfixed by the unfolding drama. In the crowd, phones vibrated with push notifications, evidence at last that Grace Whitman was innocent. Tommy gripped Emma's shoulder, voice trembling. "They can't ignore us now. They can't." The public outcry built with every second. At the prison gates, veterans in full dress uniform locked arms, blocking the approach of Keene's men. Animal rights activists waved banners for Solace, who had become a symbol of everything pure and loyal. One elderly man pressed a hand to Solace's mane, tears in his eyes. "You're her hope, boy. You're ours too." Inside, the warden's office was chaos. Phones rang off the hook. His assistant burst in, eyes wide. "Sir, there's a mob outside. TV cameras, protesters, even some local politicians. And the governor's on line one." The warden picked up, sweat trickling down his temple. "Yes, sir. No, I haven't signed off yet. Yes, we're holding her." He glanced at the live feed on his monitor. The faces of Emma, Tommy, Solace, and the churning crowd flashed on every screen. The audio files played again and again, making it impossible to look away. He hesitated, suddenly aware that every decision he made would be dissected by millions. Just then, a court official rushed in, waving a fax. "Emergency injunction, sir. Federal judge's order, halt all proceedings. Until further review, Whitman's execution is stayed." The warden felt his knees go weak. He read the document twice before speaking. "Get her out of isolation. No more movement without my say-so." In the isolation cell, Grace's guard arrived, keys jangling. He was younger than most, sweat on his brow, voice softer than she expected. "You're coming with me, Captain. They're not going to execute you. Not today." Grace didn't dare believe him. Not until she was led through winding hallways, the sounds of shouting and cheering growing louder. The guard guided her to a holding room, where a small TV showed Emma and Tommy at the gates, Solace's familiar profile looming large. Grace's heart hammered as she realized her story was out there. The world finally saw her. Back outside, the crowd reached a fever pitch. Maya's team switched the feed to national networks, interviews rolling in, veterans who owed Grace their lives, whistleblowers confirming Keene's corruption, animal trainers talking about Solace's loyalty. Emma held up the original USB drive, her voice cracking as she spoke to the cameras. "We are here for justice, for Captain Grace Whitman, for every soldier who's been failed by the system, and for every animal who's been used and discarded. We have proof. We have witnesses. We have hope." The reporters clamored for more. Tommy brought Solace forward, cameras flashing. The Mustang nuzzled the microphone, his story echoing through a million screens. Suddenly, the prison gates swung open. Federal marshals appeared, followed by the warden, a court official, and 2 nervous guards. Emma's breath caught as she recognized Grace, pale but upright, stepping into the daylight for the first time in months. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then the crowd erupted. Flags waved, reporters shouted questions. Emma and Tommy ran to Grace, tears streaming, arms thrown wide. Solace whinnied, rearing up, his hooves pawing the air in triumph. Grace stumbled, overcome, but Tommy caught her. "We did it. You're free." Grace buried her face in Solace's mane, breathing in the scent of hope and home. For the first time since her arrest, she let herself cry, deep, racking sobs that shook away months of fear. Cameras rolled, recording the moment the impossible became real. The news flashed around the world. Captain Grace Whitman saved by the truth. Red Trail conspiracy exposed. Justice for Solace and his soldier. As the sun climbed over the horizon, Grace looked at her friends, her horse, and the sea of faces who had refused to abandon her. The fight wasn't over, but she was no longer alone. The morning air was thick with the scent of damp grass and spent adrenaline as the prison yard became the stage for a reckoning no one could have predicted. Reporters leaned over barricades, their microphones thrust forward, voices tumbling over each other as they broadcast the story live. Protesters cheered, some weeping openly, others raising banners high. Justice for Grace! Free Solace! Expose Red Trail! The whole nation seemed to hold its breath. Grace Whitman stood blinking in the brightening light, eyes red-rimmed, skin sallow after months in isolation, but her back straight, her chin high. Emma was at her side in an instant, gripping her by the shoulders, searching her face. You did it, Grace. We're here. You're safe. Her words caught in her throat, choked by relief. Grace tried to speak, but only a strangled sound escaped. She looked past Emma, searching, frantic, until her gaze landed on the Mustang she thought she'd never see again. Solace, head high, scars visible on his white and gray coat, gave a soft, uncertain nicker. The world fell away as Grace stumbled toward him, every muscle trembling. The crowd parted, veterans, activists, strangers making a path for this moment. Grace pressed her face to Solace's neck, her fingers twining in his mane. You made it. You're here. I'm so sorry. She didn't care who heard her, didn't try to hold back the tears. Solace's warm breath washed over her face, steadying her, grounding her in a reality she'd feared was lost. He leaned into her with his usual gentleness, as if to say, "It's over now." Emma and Tommy watched, tears streaming down their own faces. Tommy squeezed Emma's arm. "This is why we did it," he whispered. "All of it, for them." Meanwhile, the prison gates were thrown open wider as federal marshals stormed into the administrative wing. The crowd gasped as Colonel Henry Keene, his face ashen, hands cuffed tightly behind his back, was dragged into view by two grim-faced agents. The media's attention shifted in a tidal wave. Cameras swinging, flashes popping as Keene's downfall was broadcast live. His carefully maintained composure cracked as the marshals recited his rights. Accusations of conspiracy, falsifying evidence, and the abuse of power hung heavy in the air. Reporters called out, "Colonel Keene, do you have anything to say to the American people?" He glared, lips pressed into a bloodless line, but said nothing. Instead, the camera lingered on Grace, no longer a convict, but the living proof that truth can rise from the darkest places. The warden stepped forward, hands shaking, a court order in his grip. He read aloud for the crowd and the cameras. By order of the federal court, the execution of Captain Grace Whitman is hereby stayed. Furthermore, in light of new evidence, she is to be immediately released into the custody of her legal team pending full exoneration. The crowd exploded in cheers, the sound rolling over the prison walls, reaching even those who had doubted. Grace couldn't take her eyes off Solace. "You saved me. You always save me." Her voice was hoarse but full of conviction. She pressed her forehead to the horse's, feeling his breath, his warmth, the thump of his heart, steady and strong. Emma turned to a nearby camera crew, her voice ringing clear. The truth was buried, but it couldn't be destroyed. Captain Whitman is innocent. Colonel Keene will answer for his crimes. And this She motioned to Solace and the gathered veterans. This is what loyalty looks like. Tommy stood by, quietly proud, his arm around Emma as she wept with joy. Reporters swarmed, microphones and cameras everywhere. Grace found her voice, lifting her head, speaking not just for herself, but for every soul failed by the system. "I'm alive because I wasn't alone," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "I had friends who never gave up on me. I had a community that believed the truth would win. And I had Solace, a horse who showed more loyalty and courage than most people ever will." Her words rippled through the crowd, reaching viewers in kitchens and offices across America. Social media lit up with messages of hope and outrage, calls for justice and reform. The bond between Grace and Solace became a symbol, a rallying cry for those who'd been betrayed, abandoned, or silenced. At that moment, Emma's phone buzzed. Maya Lynn on the line, voice shaking with emotion. "It's done, Grace. The files are everywhere. Congress is demanding hearings. You've changed everything." A veteran in the crowd, his own medals gleaming on his chest, approached. "Ma'am, you gave us hope. You gave us a reason to fight again." He saluted, and the gesture was echoed up and down the line. Solace, sensing the emotion, pawed at the ground, tossing his head, his presence anchoring Grace to the world. She laughed through her tears, holding the horse's face in her hands. "I owe you, old friend. I owe you my life." As the sun broke through the clouds, painting the yard in gold, the prison gates seemed to disappear. Grace stepped forward, the crowd closing around her in support. Emma and Tommy flanked her, Solace at her side, the world watching as the first chapter of her new life began. For that day, justice had a face. It wore scars and tears and carried the weight of the innocent, but it stood unbroken, surrounded by those who had never stopped believing in the power of truth. Freedom was not the ending Grace Whitman had imagined. It was the beginning of a different kind of battle. The day after her release, the world's attention followed her everywhere. Crowds gathered at the gates of the safe house where she stayed, veterans standing vigil, children waving signs drawn in crayon. "Thank you, Captain Grace. Welcome home, Solace." Cameras lingered outside, hungry for her first steps, her first words. But inside, in the silence, Grace found herself struggling against the darkness that refused to lift. She would wake before dawn, heart racing, cold sweat beating along her spine. Some mornings, she found herself crouched beside Solace's stall, forehead pressed to the Mustang's neck, counting the horse's slow breaths until her panic faded. Solace had his own scars, but he met each day with quiet resolve, as if reminding her that even the wounded could walk forward. His presence became her anchor. Emma and Tommy kept a close watch, shielding her from the relentless media storm. Emma was tireless, juggling phone calls from legal teams, journalists, and advocacy groups. But she made time each evening to sit quietly with Grace, sharing takeout food and old stories. Tommy handled the security and the logistics, patching up fences, fielding messages from grateful veterans, making sure Solace's leg healed properly. Their friendship was a lifeline, but the world would not wait. Grace's exoneration had ignited a fire across the country. News stories detailed the conspiracy she'd exposed. Protests called for justice reform and better treatment for veterans. And everywhere, people wanted to know what she would do next. The answer came one sleepless night, as Grace sat in the stable watching Solace graze beneath a sky heavy with stars. She remembered the men and women she'd served with, those who had survived and those who hadn't. She remembered her own pain, the fear that had nearly crushed her, and the small moments of hope Solace had given her. The memory sharpened into resolve. There must be more like me, she thought. Veterans carrying invisible wounds, accused without cause, waiting for a hand to pull them back from the edge. She knew she could not go back to the life she had before, but maybe she could build something new, something that would last. By sunrise, she had a plan. The next day, Grace called a meeting. Emma, Tommy, Maya Lynn, now a trusted advisor, and a handful of veteran advocates gathered in the kitchen. Grace spoke quietly, but with conviction. I want to create something that lasts, not just a statement or a protest, but a real change. I want to build a foundation for veterans who've been wrongfully accused, for survivors of trauma. I want Solace to be part of it. I want to show the world what animals like him can do. The idea sparked like kindling in dry grass. Maya immediately started drafting a website. Tommy reached out to ranchers, therapists, and legal clinics. Emma called her journalist contacts, shaping the story for maximum impact. Within a week, the Solace Project was born, a national initiative offering equine therapy to veterans, advocating for justice reform, and creating safe spaces for those failed by the system. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. $5 from a retired Marine in Nebraska, $1,000 from an anonymous donor in New York, entire school classes pooling their lunch money. Veterans volunteered as mentors. Therapists offered their time. Animal trainers showed up with gentle horses and open hearts. Grace's story appeared on morning talk shows, in news magazines, and viral social media posts. Solace, camera-shy but patient, became a symbol. His image painted on murals, his story inspiring thousands. Still, Grace struggled with the scars left by her ordeal. Flashbulbs sometimes sent her heart pounding. Crowded rooms made her hands shake. But she learned to lean on those around her, on Emma's steady encouragement, Tommy's quiet strength, Solace's wordless understanding. And she discovered a new voice, one that spoke not just of pain, but of hope and purpose. When Congress called her to testify, Grace stood before the microphone in a crisp blue suit, Solace's lucky braid on her wrist. Her hands trembled as she recounted her story, not just the injustice she'd suffered, but the healing she'd found with Solace and the others who had come to her project for help. She looked the senators in the eye and said, "We have a responsibility to our soldiers, not just to protect their bodies in war, but to protect their dignity and their hope when they come home. Animal-assisted therapy isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline." Her testimony went viral, igniting debates across the country. Editorials praised her courage. Politicians who once ignored her now scrambled to be seen supporting the Solace Project. But Grace stayed grounded, returning each evening to the barn, to Solace and the quiet rhythm of work. One morning, as Grace walked Solace along a fence line, a little girl in a wheelchair rolled up, her father watching nervously. The child reached out, brushing Solace's nose, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is he magic?" she whispered. Grace knelt beside her, smiling for the first time in what felt like years. "Maybe not magic," she said, "but he's a friend, and sometimes that's even better." The father's eyes filled with tears. "You saved more than yourself, Captain. You gave us all something to believe in again." As summer faded, the Solace Project flourished. Grace visited ranches, spoke at veteran centers and schools, met with lawmakers and activists. Solace became a national hero, a living testament to resilience and the unbreakable bond between the lost and those who never stopped fighting for them. Through it all, Grace learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about finding purpose in the present. And as long as she had Solace by her side, she knew she would never walk alone. The first autumn wind swept across the ranch, stirring leaves into swirling eddies around the paddocks. Grace Whitman paused at the gate, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills, its last rays turning Solace's coat to silver. Even after all she'd endured, the betrayal, the prison, the national storm, this simple, quiet beauty still caught her off guard. The world was changing, but she felt it now. The roots of something lasting, something good. Grace's days settled into a new rhythm. Every morning she walked the fence line with Solace, greeting the horses and the veterans who had come from across the country seeking hope. There were Marines from Ohio, Air Force medics from California, Army engineers who'd once believed they were beyond repair. Some had been wrongfully accused, others simply lost. Grace welcomed each one with a steady hand and a listening ear. In the evenings, after chores and group therapy, she would gather small groups around the big kitchen table. The room filled with laughter, with hard-won stories and unspoken pain. Grace never forced anyone to speak, but always offered space for honesty. "We're all carrying something," she'd say, her voice gentle. "Sometimes what you need most is someone who won't look away." It was at one of these gatherings that Tommy shared his own struggles, how he'd once stood on a rooftop, wondering if anyone would notice if he was gone. How Grace's stubborn kindness and Solace's silent company pulled him back. Others followed. A woman who found peace brushing Solace's mane. A former medic who finally wrote a letter home. A young man who forgave himself for mistakes made in war. Emma documented these stories, her journalist's eye capturing not just the facts, but the moments of transformation. She and Tommy had spent months writing, late nights in the ranch office, coffee cups scattered, laptops glowing. Their book, The Fight for Grace, told the world about betrayal and courage, but it was more than an expose. It was a love letter to loyalty, to friendship, to the unexpected wisdom of animals. Grace reflected often on the meaning of loyalty. It wasn't blind obedience, or even patriotism, though she still loved her country. Loyalty was something deeper, the courage to stand by someone when the world walks away. It was in the way Emma had risked everything for the truth, the way Tommy had run through danger with nothing but faith, the way Solace, wounded and hunted, never gave up on her. These lessons became the heart of her public speaking. Grace traveled to veteran centers, schools, even law schools where Keene's case was now a cautionary tale. She spoke without bitterness, focusing instead on the power of conscience, community, and the fight for justice. "Loyalty means holding on," she told one audience. "Even when it hurts, even when you're scared. And sometimes, it means telling the truth when everyone else stays silent." Her words found fertile ground. Veterans wrote to thank her for restoring their faith. Parents brought children to meet Solace, hoping the horse's gentle strength would soothe old wounds. Therapists and activists joined the Solace Project, sharing stories of recovery and hope. One fall afternoon, Grace was invited to a large public school. The gymnasium was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. She looked out over hundreds of faces, kids who'd only ever seen her story online. She told them about Solace in Afghanistan, about the importance of listening, and about the responsibility of standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. During the Q&A, a shy boy raised his hand. "How did you keep going when everyone said you were guilty?" Grace knelt down, meeting his eyes. "Sometimes You have to believe in yourself even when nobody else does. But more than that, you have to find people who see you, who know the truth, even if it's buried. And you have to be that person for someone else. Emma and Tommy stood in the back, hearts full. The community they'd built had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. The Solace project now spanned 4 states, with plans to open more centers in the new year. They helped thousands, veterans and civilians, rediscover hope through therapy, horses, and honest conversation. Grace saw firsthand that justice, while sometimes delayed, must never be abandoned. She spoke at rallies for wrongful conviction reform, testifying alongside other survivors. She worked with lawmakers to strengthen protections for whistleblowers and veterans, always crediting the team that stood by her and the horse who'd carried her through darkness. Her most cherished moments, though, were simple. Walking Solace in the quiet dawn, or sitting with a new arrival on the porch, sharing coffee in silence. She learned that healing wasn't a finish line, but a process, and that even the smallest kindness could change a life. Emma and Tommy's book was released on Veterans Day, hitting the bestseller list within a week. They donated the proceeds to the Solace Project, funding new programs and scholarships. The media attention brought new volunteers, more horses, and most importantly, more people willing to fight for justice. On the anniversary of her release, Grace stood at the ranch's main gate, watching a caravan of cars pull in. Former clients returned to say thank you. Some brought children, others brought stories. One by one, they hugged Grace, whispered words of gratitude, or simply walked with her and Solace through the golden fields. That night, around a crackling bonfire, Grace spoke softly to the group gathered beneath the stars. "The truth will always find its way," she said, voice carrying across the dark. "Not because it's easy, but because we never stop fighting for it. Loyalty, courage, and a little bit of stubborn hope. That's what saved me. That's what can save any of us." As sparks drifted upward, Tommy strummed a quiet tune on his guitar. Emma leaned against Solace, her heart finally at peace. And Grace, surrounded by her chosen family, understood at last that loyalty to conscience and to each other was the greatest legacy she could leave. Years slipped by, but the ranch where it all began never lost its sense of purpose. Wildflowers crowded the fence lines each spring, and the wind off the distant mountains carried the laughter of children and the calm voices of veterans. From the porch, Grace Whitman watched it all, her hair now flecked with gray, her posture strong as ever. Each morning, Solace would greet her with a low nicker, the old Mustang's coat dusted with white around his muzzle, his eyes as sharp as the first day she'd met him. Time had deepened the bonds formed in fire and struggle. The Solace Project, once a dream scribbled on a notepad at the kitchen table, had grown into a national foundation. The ranch was now the headquarters, a place where therapy horses roamed in herds and veterans found work, friendship, and sometimes even peace. Solace, revered as the heart of the project, led the herd with quiet confidence, still visiting Grace daily. The youngest children called him the Gentle King, and even the most closed-off newcomers seemed to relax when his soft nose nudged their hands. Grace's own life had become a tapestry woven from 1,000 small victories. She was no longer just the soldier who'd been wronged, or the survivor who'd fought her way back. She was a mentor, an advocate, a living symbol of what could be rebuilt. Her schedule was filled with speaking engagements and advisory roles, but she never missed morning chores at the barn or the chance to listen to a struggling veteran's story over strong coffee and cinnamon rolls. On anniversaries, the ranch held open houses, Soldiers and their families came from across the country to share stories, reunite with old friends, and walk the familiar trails where they'd found healing. Each year, the crowd grew. Emma, now a respected journalist and best-selling author, chronicled these gatherings in moving essays that traveled far beyond the ranch's gates. Tommy, finally at peace with his past, managed day-to-day operations, training both horses and people in patience, honesty, and the importance of second chances. One crisp fall morning, Grace walked the perimeter with Solace at her side. She paused at the memorial stone near the north pasture, carved with the names of veterans who had found new hope here. She ran her fingers over the cool granite, her heart swelling with both sorrow and gratitude. She thought of those she'd lost, and of the countless lives her story had touched but would never know by name. As she walked back toward the barn, a group of children ran up, trailing laughter. One little girl, her hair in tight braids, her arms full of wild daisies, looked up with wide eyes. "Miss Grace, is it true Solace saved your life?" Grace knelt down, Solace lowering his head so the girl could stroke his nose. "Yes, it's true," Grace said softly. "He saved me more than once. But the most important thing is, he helped me save myself too. Sometimes the hardest battles are inside us. That's why we have to look out for each other." Inside the barn, the walls were covered in photos, snapshots of soldiers, kids, horses, and families. In the center hung a framed copy of the court order that had saved Grace's life, next to a plaque that read, "Loyalty, truth, never give up." For the young veterans in training, it was more than decoration. It was a promise. Grace's story became part of the curriculum at law schools and military academies. Students debated the lessons of the Red Trail scandal, the abuse of power, and the courage required to speak out. Professors assigned Emma and Tommy's book, using it to spark conversations about ethics, justice, and the importance of community. "Let this be a warning," one professor would say, "of what happens when power goes unchecked, and a beacon for what's possible when ordinary people refuse to give up." Every so often, news crews returned to the ranch, seeking updates on the foundation and its unlikely founders. Grace always made time to share the spotlight with her team and with Solace, who had grown even wiser with age. The cameras loved the sight of the Mustang leading a herd of therapy horses, children laughing in his wake, and veterans smiling quietly as they mucked stalls or walked sunlit trails. Yet, for all the attention, it was the quiet moments that mattered most to Grace. Late at night, she would sit on the porch, mug of tea in hand, listening to the wind and the soft nickers from the paddock. Sometimes Tommy would join her, guitar in hand, strumming low melodies while Emma typed away at her next story by the window. The past never fully let go, but its grip softened, replaced by a hard-won peace. The story of Colonel Keene and the Red Trail conspiracy became required reading, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and the cost of silence. But for those who'd lived it, Grace's journey was remembered as something more. A lesson in resilience, in standing up for truth no matter how dark the night. She had taught a generation that justice may be delayed, but it must never be abandoned. As another year faded, Grace found herself mentoring a new class of volunteers, young soldiers and civilians, some still carrying heavy burdens. She'd tell them, "The truth doesn't die in darkness. It's carried forward by those willing to fight for it, even when it's buried deep." She'd point to Solace, grazing peacefully, and say, "Hope isn't a miracle. It's work and patience and the loyalty of friends, human and animal alike." On the last night of summer, the ranch glowed with lantern light. Old friends gathered by the bonfire, swapping stories and singing songs. Solace lay down beside the flames. Children curled against his warm side, their dreams untroubled. Grace looked out over the scene, her heart full. She knew, beyond all doubt, that the truth always finds its way back, through courage, through loyalty, and through the unbreakable bond between the lost and those who never stop searching for them. That was the legacy she left behind, and the story the world would never forget.